Welcome, Rana. Thank you for talking to us. Rana's book, Gujarat Files, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, was launched yesterday with a lot of noise, a lot of argument at the launch. And it's a very brave book. She's taken a lot of risks to come up with this kind of thing. Personal risks and professional risks. I think she's still at risk after reading the book. You had your book launch yesterday, which I believe, I'm sorry I missed it. I believe it was fascinating. Everybody who's in liberal journalism was there.
Well, we had, I think, left, right, and center. We
Who
had
was
quite
there
an
from the right?
Well, I didn't quite notice because there were about 465 in a hall meant for 150, and there were 150 stranded outside.
Yeah, I believe there were quite a few funny incidents, such as a senior Congress politician who fell on his face. Not funny, sorry, sad.
Not really, and yeah, and we had a few cops standing outside who said, "Oh, pura JNU ka lot aaya hai." So, yeah, I don't know. I really could not make out. I could not meet my friends. I could not meet my fellow journalists and editors who turned up. I could not even say hello to any of the politicians who turned up because there was a mob there waiting for the autograph, of course. So, I would have loved to see who all turned up, how many left, how many rightists, but I wish I.
Now, the large part of this book to me was reading it as a journalist, written by a journalist, was that the real story to me was, of course, how you did it, because that stands out more than anything else. Before one looks at the quality of reporting, the quality of the analysis that you put together and the conclusions you came to, one cannot but be impressed and overwhelmed with the risks you took, the dedication that you put in to get this story out, to be carrying out a sting operation on police officers, on senior police officers and politicians and bureaucrats is in Gujarat. It's an extremely risky business. So one has to applaud you for that.
Thank you.
In fact, I think that you're possibly in this circumstance should be considered one of the bravest journalists in India today. But even the person who wrote your prologue, Justice B.N. Sri Krishna, said in his prologue, he had one foot out the door, which to my mind was kind of cowardly. He wrote, while one may not be in a position to validate all that is narrated in this book.
Well, I think it was very valid on his part because the tapes have not been tested by the forensic team. The laws are such that any sting operation, any tape which is conducted, any sting operation which is conducted in the country has to go through forensics, has to be, go through the laboratory, has to be checked by the SIT, CBI. So on his, you have to give it to him. He's a Supreme Court judge, and he carries that kind of a responsibility on his shoulders. He was a part of, when I spoke to him about, writing what he felt about it, he said, listen, I was a part of the Sri Krishna Commission report that inquired into the Mumbai riots, but then I had officers deposing before me. Here they are talking to you in front of the camera, and for whose veracity has to be checked by the CBI and the agencies. So on his part, I think he was very fair in what he wrote.
So are you going to submit these tapes to...
I am waiting for any of the agencies who gave a clean chit in the past, SIT, CBI, to kind of approach me for these tapes. I'll be more than happy. I'd be happy if they approached Tehelka, for whom I did this sting operation, because they have the master copy with them, the main copy. I'd be happy if they asked Tarun and Shoma, who were my editors then at that point of time, for the tapes before asking me. I'd be more than happy to help them with the tapes. They have the hard disk with me. Having said that, for the last 5 years, I've approached I think almost every possible news organization in the country since 2012, when I finally figured that Tehelka was not going to publish it. And it's been a negative from every possible individual, including publication houses, book publishers, magazines, political magazines, news channels, almost everybody. I've exhausted all my sources, including some who, one with whom I had a contract for a year, and of course they stopped taking my calls after Jan 2014, and when I wrote them a mail that I'm easing out of this because nobody's taking my calls, nobody wants to answer my SMSs for a month, and immediately I got a response for them, your call. So it was a way of basically easing me out of the contract.
So let's look at it this way. You had to self-publish this book because, first of all, nobody was picking up your story, the sting operation that you did, and you ended your book in the last 2 pages, kind of throwing Shoma Chowdhury and Tarun Tejpal under the bus for not running your story.
I haven't really thrown them under the bus. I have just stated circumstances as they are, and that's my stand on everybody in the book. I have stated facts as they are. I have not taken an opinion. I haven't said, spoken about the motive so far. I am still unable to understand why would Tarun and Shoma not carry an investigation of this sort. In fact, one of my colleagues at Tehelka, who is now a part of a political party, and one of the editors said, when
Ashish Khaitan.
I don't want to name names right now.
Well, who else who worked with your editor and now is political party?
And he said it's when they couldn't end up giving an explanation to me, and they realized that I was being I wanted answers from them, straight answers, and they said. And he said, well, this is coffee table conversation for me. I said, really, a coffee table conversation in which the investigating officer in the Harin Pandya case says that the man who assassinated Harin Pandya was in our custody and he was let out to assassinate him. Since when has this become a coffee table conversation? I would have appreciated if they could give me a more logical, factual response to anything, rather than telling me that we were under tremendous pressure when the Bangaru Lakshman sting was carried out. You yourself have done a book, so you know the circumstances. For me, the question was, I wasn't a guinea pig at the age of 26 to be sent to Gujarat undercover for 8 months to come back and be told that your investigation cannot be published. So that's my only grievance so far. Yeah.
I did speak to Tarun, and as you know, Shoma's out of the country, so she couldn't be reached. But I did ask Tarun about it, and he said that he went through your notes and he gave it to Shoma, saying that I can't make head or tail out of it. They're too garbled. One has to analyze and come to a conclusion to make a story out of it. And Shoma, I don't have her response, frankly, so I don't know what she did with it. But basically, this is what they said, and this what Tarun said. And Tarun said that they had been publishing stuff like this about Gujarat for years, done by you and by Ashish Khaitan.
I think it speaks for itself, what you just said. You have read the book, so have others who have been reviewing and commenting about it. Does it look garbled to you? It's come in the same format as it went to Tehelka in the form of transcripts. Now that Tarun has spoken, I think I can take the liberty of sharing the mails that were sent to me. In one of the mails, when they decided not to publish it, Shoma said she was in Pakistan with Ram Jethmalani, and he told her that he had some kind of inkling that they had done an investigation or a sting operation. I did not understand why Ram Jethmalani, who was a counsel for Amit Shah, had to be told about my sting operation in the first place. See, once you start exchanging, I've stayed away from any of these.
So what did she say about Ram Jethmalani?
I don't know. She said they were aware of the sting operation. I said, really, if they were aware, they would be saying all this. I would rather have
saying
had
all what?
All these confessions that they have made on tape.
No, what was the mail she sent you from Pakistan?
She came back to India and she said, I was with Ram Jethmalani in Pakistan, and he said that he was privy to the fact that some investigation had been carried out by Tehelka. Now, I do not see why that was a reason for them to kind of not publish the investigation. And if it is garbled, it's in front of you. Why? I mean, it doesn't look garbled to me. It doesn't look like a coffee table conversation to me, and the verdict is out.
One has to say that it needs an editor. The book needs an editor.
Well, I went to every possible publication house, and that's the job of the editors in the organization, right? To sift it out and get through it. I mean, the editors were Tarun and Shoma. You could not have sent me out in the field without any guidance of any sort. I was the one who created a fake PAN card. I was the one who arranged the residence for myself.
You took huge risks.
I took huge risks. And with the first mail that I sent to Tarun Tejpal, I did not really want to make it a Tarun Shoma affair because this is more about justice and truth. But the first mail I sent to them was after the Harin Pandya transcripts that I sent them, and he replied back saying, excellent, this is going to create a sensation in the country. So I don't understand why did the garbles, the same excellent bit, turn into garble at a later stage.
Was this your first sting operation?
Yes.
So, when you got when you transcribed everything, the idea then is to cull it through and come to some kind of a sort of a plausible story that you can put together. My reading of this is, while I applaud your everything that you've done and the risks you've taken, and I don't think there's a braver journalist in the country today who will stand out and do something like this. The fact that you had to self-publish it speaks for itself, that no publisher would take on the government or Narendra Modi and Amit Shah. But looking at it dispassionately, and I say this with great respect for the risk you've taken and with great love, in fact, for a young journalist who's going forward, and I would not want to discourage you in any way, but in a dispassionate way, as a much, much older journalist, someone who's old enough to be your mother, I would say that it does need a lot of editing, a lot of culling down, a lot of distilling to give a narrative to the story. The narrative is missing, Bache.
The point is, see, I am not here to, you know, that's the job of any reviewer, and reviewers can do it as much as they want to.
No, I'm talking as an
yes,
editor.
Yes, let me
like if this material had come to you, to me, as an editor, and you were, say, working in my news organization, I wouldn't publish it, but I would say, I wouldn't reject it.
But I wouldn't
say we will not publish
I wouldn't
it.
really be a part of an organization where an editor refuses to take the responsibility of editing the book. When an editor reads the excerpt of the book and an editor reads the excerpts of the footage, if he has invested 8 months in the reporter and the reporter has put his life out there, he would not dismiss it in one conversation.
No,
he would give attention
I would say
to
that
it.
It needs to be.
No,
work.
I really do.
I mean,
See, let's keep the. You know, I'll tell you what.
I would say that if I was the editor, I would say let's sit down and make it work.
Let's talk as journalists, and rather than getting into any relationship that we have spoken so far. Most of the editors who have read this book, Rajdeep Sardesai, Hartosh Singh Bal, every possible editor in this country who has read it, people who have reviewed it, are talking about the content of the book, are talking about how Ashok Narayan. No. But the editing bit, I refuse to understand. If I had taken a narrative bit, if I had started sitting together and putting out judgment, I would have been accused of taking it as face value. A sting operation has to be put the way it is. I would not want to give my judgment. I have stated facts as they are. I am not going to sit here and take a moral position on it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm talking about a technical thing. I'm not talking about why didn't you take a moral position. I think when you have material like this and one gets so much of, overload on recordings, the idea in the end is to sift it through.
Right.
And to then come to a kind of a book in which instead of just putting pure transcriptions, there is also a narrative which is missing in the book.
No,
but that is my opinion.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the next thing.
The fact is that this book is not about opinion. I mean, so many polemic pieces. I'm talking about so many narratives and opinion pieces already written about Gujarat, with most journalists covering Gujarat. Why would I do that? I was doing a sting operation, so I have stated facts as they are, and transcripts were an essential part of it.
Now, you have also written about detaching yourself from the story in your introduction. It's really difficult for a journalist, actually. You said a good journalist should learn the art of detaching herself from a story and be pragmatic. This is what an editor told you. I think it's impossible to detach yourself from a story.
I think it was more ironical when I said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's impossible actually to detach yourself from a story that is so emotional, that relates to killings, and one can't ignore the fact that you come from the community that was where there were these massacres.
Hang on,
that
see,
took place.
my community, and that's the major problem that I have. I don't understand why my work cannot be seen as the work of a journalist rather than bringing my community in. I mean, I don't know what community do I represent. I belong to a socialist family, and I've never really thought about my religion when I started covering. I covered I covered the Mumbai riots. I also covered the killings of Dalits and tribals in Maharashtra to a greater extent. But at that point of time, I never really thought of my faith.
No,
When-
Rana, I'm saying it in a different way. Please understand.
no,
me.
the reason why I'm being defensive is because
No,
over
you
the
don't need
last
to be.
I'm saying over the last 10 years I have seen so many questions coming to me linking my faith to my investigations that it kind of becomes a bit too after a point of time you want to tell them
Yeah. No, it's look, when I'm doing a story on say a rape victim, the fact that I'm a woman affects the way I do a story because it's my gender. What I'm saying is that there is a certain emotional connect which why should one deny?
but why should there be any emotional why can't just
Aren't
we
there an emotional connect?
No,
connect?
no.
Say if I'm living in America and I'm doing a story about India, which I was, I would have a different way and a feeling and an emotion in covering a story about India than say an American would. Could not be.
I would take offense here if my faith is brought in because I did dispassionately. For me, my faith had nothing to do with my investigation.
We'll go to some of the live questions that have come on Facebook. Saurabh Rajput asks that she openly supports Ishrat Jahan. Do you support Ishrat Jahan?
I support the judicial process and the investigation in the case and do not support Ishrat Jahan as a person. I am only going by the investigation and by the paperwork in the case. I am only going by the subversion of justice that I see in front of me. That I see when 10 officers of the Modi dispensation are caught in a sting operation which has been placed in front of the Supreme Court where they are talking about obfuscation of investigation in the Ishrat Jahan case. As a journalist, I'll most certainly talk about it, just like I did say with the Tulsi Prajapati case.
I think the question really is, do you think that Ishrat Jahan was a member of the Lashkar-e-Toiba?
That's up to the courts to decide. I have placed my transcripts in the book. I have placed the paperwork. I am not going to take a stand on a matter which is sub judice.
Well, yesterday there were a couple of channels that were covering the story of Ishrat Jahan, specifically because many new developments had taken place. Documents were leaked. Praveen Swami wrote about how the report that came in first said that Ishrat Jahan was a member of the Lashkar-e-Toiba. Their newspaper lauded her as a martyr, and then soon after, when as the report says, the Congress party got into the act and decided to remove all reference to her related to the Lashkar-e-Toiba, it was then just decided that she wasn't part of it. And then the Lashkar-e-Toiba paper also withdrew her the statement that she was a martyr.
Is that the evidence that we are going to look at in a criminal investigation about whether a newspaper owned by the Lashkar-e-Toiba names somebody and withdraws the name? I don't think in a criminal...
No, it is. I'm talking about the documents that were leaked.
Yeah, by that yardstick, Lashkar-e-Toiba also spoke about their links with the JNU crisis in India. I don't really think that JNU crisis and the people who were dissenting at that point of time were funded by the Lashkar-e-Toiba. I mean, Lashkar-e-Toiba is a terrorist organization. But do we want to take it at face value? Do we want to take it as evidentiary value? Well, that I would leave at
but as a journalist, when you see the evidence that Headley also mentioned her as a member of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the documents that have been leaked also mentioned it, and then the UPA has been shown that they destroyed that, changed the evidence, rather removed that evidence, and now suddenly those documents are missing from the Home Ministry.
Have you read Headley's defense to the prosecution witness? Let me tell you at the onset, David Headley was the same guy who came when he first deposed, said that the 2611 co-accused who were arrested by Maharashtra ATS were not involved in the recognizer. And after he said that, two alleged terrorists who were nailed for 2611 attacks in Bombay were let off. The same David Headley was prompted by Ujjwal Nikam he was given the names by her. Is that a criminal investigation? Why did Ujjwal Nikam anticipate a month before on a news debate that in a month's time you will see a major deposition in Ishrat Jahan case? How did Ujjwal Nikam anticipate this? Which clearly means that Ujjwal Nikam knew what was going to happen. How can a public prosecutor anticipate the response of a man who is going to depose?
So you do have a position on it, actually. You're saying
I have a position on the investigation.
that you do believe that she was not part of Lashkar-e-Toiba.
I am saying I have a problem with the investigation. That doesn't mean I'm talking about giving credence to Ishrat Jahan as whether she was a terrorist or not. That's for the courts to decide, and that's what I'm saying. When the CBI says that the encounter is fake, and now we have these, who was the one supposed to believe? The SIT, the CBI, or not these new revelations? So there has to be an independent agency which kind of probes into it. We do not believe in the veracity of the CBI investigation because we think the CBI was at that point of time working, motivated by the Congress regime. I would want to know who are the people who are now coming out and speaking about, say, Satyapal Singh, who's now with the BJP, and other people whose versions we want to believe. So why can't we have an independent inquiry before calling a woman who might as well be innocent, calling her a terrorist? And mind you, that's a big tag. When you name a woman, a 16-year-old who is allegedly a Fedayeen, a jihadi activist who is going around with a college I-card when she is shot dead. And I have GL Singhal, one of the investigating officers, who also shot at Ishrat Jahan, telling me in this tape that when he shot that girl, he did not know whether she was a terrorist. So, I mean, it's all, the jury is out.
But he did not know, but he also, she could have been. There is the possibility she could have been.
What if she was not a terrorist? That's what I'm saying. She could have been, she could not have been. But who are we to decide on that? There are courts in this country, there are agencies in this country who will decide that. But we cannot make a mockery of it on television news channels. You can't have ex-officers coming on TV and giving their version. Why were these officers, my question is very journalistic, why were these officers silent at all this while when they were in positions of power? One of the officers is now, who is now in a key position in Adani, on the Adani board, executive director.
Yes.
Why is he wanting to speak about it now? I mean, G.K. Pillai, wasn't he responsible to the country more than anything else? Was he misleading the country when he gave a clean chit to Ishrat Jahan? When news channels approached him asking if Ishrat Jahan was a terrorist, he said, I would give her a benefit of doubt. So I would want to know, how does his memory keep changing by each day?
When the government changes.
When the government
obviously.
changes, mostly, yes.
Now, you interviewed a series of ex-police officers and officers, and we did know over the years that officers who had ostensibly done what was expected of them by the government, by the state government, they got good postings and they carried on working over there and they got promotions, and the ones who didn't, was that story was coming out in bits and pieces. It also came out in the courts by many of the police who the whistleblowers and then who were shafted, and the ones who stood up against what was happening. So in that sense, a large part of it you have collated together and got on record, which was coming out in bits and pieces. Now, could you tell us, out of all the sting operations that you did in this thing, which was the one that you thought was the most crucial, that was the clinching evidence?
Well, the entire book is full of clinching evidence if one is privy to the investigation that takes place in the case. I think every bit of this case is full of clinching evidence. The book, when you have Ashok Narayan, who was the Home Secretary, who tells me that he asked Modi to not give Praveen Togadia the permission to hold a rally in Gujarat, which could have led to riots. He looked at him and said, yes, you have to give him the permission. And he looked back and said, give me written orders, and he just stared at him. He told, in the same breath, Ashok Narayan says he recommended that Rahul Sharma, who saved Muslim lives during the riots, not be suspended. But Modi went ahead and suspended him, saying that we did not need an officer. There was an officer, Rajan Priyadarshi, who talks about Amit Shah calling him to his bungalow and saying, "Aapki custody mein jo 3 log hai, unko aap uda dijiye." In the same breath, he goes on to say that Amit Shah told him, that Ishrat Jahan was in custody in our farm, tab to kisi ne kuch nahi bola. So these are some. I mean, you have PC Pandey. I mean, if you read the PC Pandey narrative, more than what they did as commissioners or intelligence chief. Look at how they sound as individuals. See, these are the heads of various positions. PC Pandey says, अगर उन्होंने 2 बार अच्छा लगता है कि उन्होंने 2 बार किया, हमने 1 बार दिया. That's the kind of language the Commissioner of Police during Gujarat riot speaks. That also says a lot about the mindset of people in Gujarat at that point of time, and which still is, I think, Gujarat is largely polarized even now. And I mean, you don't blame the Gujaratis. This is how the political atmosphere. This is how the political atmosphere has been vitiated over the last 2 decades.
Now, Singhal, who you interviewed, comes across as a man who was used by Amit Shah and Narendra Modi and then dumped to face charges against him, which he said he had carried out on their orders. It exposes your whole book exposes a rather vulnerable police force. There's a clear choice. If you play along, you will do well in your career. If you don't, you're going to be sent to the sheep and wool department or to some small little basti where you won't have any work to do. Basically, what we all know, but you have confirmed in your book, is that in any, even in a bureaucracy or in the police force, any IAS officer, anything, either you play along with the minister and the political party in power or you're in trouble. What do you think is the way forward in this? What do you think is the solution? If you look at what has happened, for example, you had trouble finding a publisher. You're having trouble with channels who would even publish the recordings that you have. Everyone, why do you think that's so? Are you going to spell out why it is?
I still have not been able to find an answer to this. Not for the news media in this country. I don't understand why do they have to be neutral in a time like this. It's not just about being neutral. I mean, as Rajdeep said in yesterday's conversation, he said, you know, most of the times journalists do not take a stand because they think, oh, if I speak about that party, we might not get access to the party spokesperson or the bigwigs in the party, because then we will be treated as pariahs. We will not be touched. We will be treated as untouchable. Rajdeep, before he came to the launch, was threatened by many in the ministry saying, you are going to the launch, mind you. That says something about how most of us are towing the line of the government. The reason why I have not taken up a job in the last 2 years, ever since I quit Tehelka, on whatever grounds that I did, on principal grounds after the entire episode took place, I have been approached by at least 2 newspapers saying, oh, why don't you do, Rana, you're a terrific journalist, why don't you do this? Just forget that Modi exists for a while. And so I replied to one of the most high profile editors. I said, let me tell you, I'm not into pimping yet. For me, I guess I belong to that school of journalism where I do not know how to be close to any political party. In yesterday's, at the book launch yesterday, which lasted for a good 2 hours, I spent an hour saying that the Congress is just as bad as the BJP with a veneer of secularism. So the Congress and BJP are both to be blamed. Congress is to be blamed for the Nelly massacre, for the 84 riots, just as the BJP and the Shiv Sena are to be blamed for the 92 riots, or for that matter, the Gujarat riots, and so on and so forth.
Now, when you were leaning towards some sympathy towards Singhal, which happens to many journalists, it happened to me when I was interviewing people for my book and through my career, no matter how guilty a person is in whatever act they have done, and you are interviewing them for that reason, and you do it, and you're meeting them repeatedly over a period of time, you spoke about how you were beginning to feel guilty that these people were making you part of their family. They were confiding in you. They were open with you, and
yeah, one of the ministers, a lady, would oil my hair and treat me like a daughter. One would get me a shawl from a vacation. The other would cook for me every weekend.
So you felt
there was, of course, I'd feel horrible about it. Horrible. I'd feel nauseous at times. But at the same time, and one of the officers, Ashok Narayan, when I went to his residence, and he would send me books on spiritualism because he realized that I was too young, and I should get married, etc. That typical fatherly feeling. And one of the days when I was doing this thing, I was sitting at his residence, and we were having this chai coffee session, and one of Modi's secretary at that point of time, chief secretary or principal secretary, Kailash Nathan, walks in, and I've recorded that bit. And he tells him that Modi ji has sent me to you. I mean, he's a retired officer, Ashok Narayan. He sends him to him saying, Modi ji ने भेजा है आपके यहाँ, आपके जो brother-in-law हैं, इनको हिमाचल प्रदेश से सीट दे रहे हैं हम BJP की. The point is that these are good people, that necessarily, but if only the good people had the spine to speak the truth in front of the commissions of inquiry, rather than be in a position of bartering information for such positions. As you see, when he got his brother-in-law a seat from Himachal Pradesh. I mean, these are good men, but that doesn't mean they all have the spine to speak the truth. They're essentially good people. I'm sure they would, having given a choice, they would not go out and attack Muslims, given a choice. But they were rendered helpless because they decided to toe the line of the dispensation, because they did not want to go the other way. Like one of the officers says that Kuldeep Sharma, PC Pandey says, Kuldeep Sharma, look at him. What happens when you do not toe the line of the government? Of course, you will be thrown in the sheep and wool department. The same PC Pandey is going out of the way to introduce me to Amit Shah and Narendra Modi for lunch and tell me how principled and RSS men that they are and have great ideology, and that I should also meet his son who is in Surat, who's a diamond trader. You kind of see where it is coming from. So despite the fact that I did feel sympathetic for them, and as I've mentioned in the book, because at the end of the day, I'm a human being. I wasn't a robot there who would not feel for these people.
You're lucky to have a mother like you do. Like she put you back on track.
Yeah, I mean,
saying remember why you're there, remember what they did, and that's remarkable. You're blessed in that.
I called her and I said, I said, I can't do this because these people trust me so much. This man, Singhal, he's facing trouble at home. His son committed suicide a year later because he could not take the kind of the allegations that were leveled against his father. And of course, the father confided in them that there were certain wrongs that he did in his life. And then he would talk to me about Osho and that, I was somebody who would smoke cigarette, and he said, isko chhod do. He would talk to me like he would to a younger sister. And that made me feel guilty. But again, as I said, my mom pointed out, at the end of the day, they did shoot innocent people. They did toe the line of the government. And irrespective of how good you are as a human being, you will be measured by the acts that you have done in life, irrespective, and that includes me as well.
Now, you've got some remarkable recordings, which I don't think in the history of journalism anyone has got, in terms of the number of police officers, the Home Secretary, people in power. Are you feeling disheartened that by all standards this should have been a major publisher picking up your book, some channel picking up your recordings and showing them?
The first person after Tarun refused to carry the story, Tarun and Shoma, I went to one of the publication houses which finds its office in the same building as Tehelka, and I went to her and she said, "Oh, it's a fantastic story." The next day,
Rolly Books?
Yes, and the next day she got a call, of course, because she was great friends with the organization. She said, "We can't publish your book." And I knew that from here on, I'll have to not just face the pressure from political groups, but also my own fraternity, and I mean, it was disappointing. After a point of time, before the book was published, 2 news magazines were supposed to publish the excerpt of my book, and before I came in, the day I landed in Bombay for my last minute preparation for the book launch, they messaged me and said, "We are facing tremendous political pressure, Rana. We cannot publish the excerpt of your book." I remember I was in the car from the airport to my house in Vashi. I was choking, I was crying in the car, and the driver kept on looking at me. And I called up my friend and I said, "Tell me, what wrong have I done?" In the last 2 years, I've been without a job. I've been, only earning from columns, and all my effort, and since 2012, has been because I refuse to sleep with this on my conscience. I refuse to sleep with the fact that I know the truth and I yet cannot talk about it. And why is it that everybody is not showing enough spine to publish it? Forget publishing it. Why can't they even publish an excerpt from the book when they had promised me?
Many magazines and
now,
websites have published.
Yes, now they have. But these were mainstream publications who I approached, and they had promised me.
Well, this is relevant now. Abhijit Vishisht is asking, why should you wait for the CBI to seek you out for more evidence? Do you think they will do it because your book has come out now? Why not take the risk of participating in investigation by contacting SIT with lawyers?
I would be more than happy. In fact, I'm in the process of getting a lawyer because I would not want to go and trust somebody just by myself. I would want to have a lawyer who accompanies me to the SIT, so that I know that at this point of time, I'm working by myself. I don't even have a legal support system. Tomorrow I could be arrested for various cases, for doing a sting operation. You have to understand that I'm a lone fighter in this particular case, and I really do not have the apparatus to approach this to agency. So I will need a lawyer with whom I can accompany. I will need cooperation from the SIT and the CBI, and the willingness to see my evidence independently and objectively.
Saif Ahmed Khan is asked, he says he was at your book launch yesterday, and wherein she said, that is you, it was because of her conscience that she wrote this book. The question that I want to ask Rana is, if it is about conscience, then why didn't you make the tapes in your possession public in the run-up to the 2014 general elections? That could have certainly altered the election discourse and forced Modi and company to answer questions about Gujarat riots. Why now? Why not earlier?
Well, if I had done this earlier, I would have been accused of political motivation, and which is precisely why when two political parties, including the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party, approached me before the 2014 elections saying that we heard that your book has been pulped, I said if I do it now, I do not want to be seen as have been working for the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party, because this was a journalistic work and not a political work. I did not want to do it before any of the elections, because as we see in the past, every sting operation has been seen with suspicion as having been done at the behest of any political party. So I did not want, this is a journalistic piece of work, this has been done independently. Over the last 5 years I could have published it, but I could have been immediately behind bars because the book, the evidence was not out. You know,
Behind bars on what basis?
Criminal trespassing into any property. There are various cases that can be slapped against me for using a Tehelka property. For this, I mean, technically this is Tehelka property, and they still have a case against me.
They have a case against you?
Yes, of course they do have a case against me.
They filed a case against
They
you?
can have a case against
okay,
me.
They
can
could
have
your
yeah.
saying. Now, yesterday in the launch, you asked Rajdeep why his channel doesn't.
I didn't ask. It was Sabah Naqvi who asked him this
Sabah
question.
asked.
Yes.
And what did he say?
He said that Sabah should first ask this question with the people with whom she has a contract, which translated into Times Now, and also that I mean, at the end of the day, the fact that Rajdeep did not chicken out, unlike most of the panelists on the show who are supposed to moderate, speaks volumes of the fact that where he stands in this.
Did you ask other people who refused to come?
Yes, too many.
बोल ना.
नहीं यार,
अरे बता.
कितनों का नाम लूंगी मैं?
अरे दो तो बता.
नहीं.
Let's know the cowards.
There are too many cowards in this country. I think this country the media is full of cowards, and they of course cited institutional issues and legal issues. So good for them. I mean, I finally found a great panel at the end of the day.
You did.
Yes, I think it was a terrific panel. I think Indra was terrific. I think Rajdeep was terrific. So was Hartosh, and I really hold them in great respect that they stuck their neck out on an issue like this, and I have great respect for them for turning up at the event yesterday and speaking telling us what they really went through when they were when they were reporting on Gujarat, and Hartosh when he was reporting on 1984, and unfortunately both were the same Supreme Court. There was Justice Nanavati on both the occasions. So the fact that we spoke about these things so openly said that some of us in the media still have the spine, and I have great respect for them.
Now, what are you going to do now?
I'll wait for the agencies to come. If nothing, then I'll approach my lawyers and I'll try to find a way in which the Tehelka Hard Disk, which is with the organization, finds its way to the agencies.
Now, in your book, in one of the transcripts, I think it was Pandey who said to you that it was the most horrific time of my life. I'd already seen 30 years of service, but look at this. There were riots in 85, 87, 89, 92. And most of the times, the Hindus got a beating and the Muslims got an upper hand. And then he repeats it again. So, yes, you hit them back, and now this hitting back, you must have already done research that they got a beating, 85, 86, 92, and so on. And what happens here is the chance. Give it back to them. Why should anyone mind it? And how do you say Modi should? So answer that. See, what happened when we were growing up, whenever we heard of riots, we always heard that it was the Hindus who were being killed. And after Ayodhya, there was a completely different approach to covering the riots, as well as what the outcome would be. So, do you think that this, what he said to you, that this time the Muslims had the upper hand, the Hindus had the upper hand, has any justification?
Unfortunately, I was just about an year old when the 84 riots took place, so I couldn't do much about it. But I was about 9 years old when the Bombay riots took place, and I remember all our neighbors, we were the only Muslims in the cosmopolitan locality. My father was a government school teacher who would give admission to both the RSS students and students of the RSS Shakha and the leftists. We both had a CPIM office and the RSS Shakha next to each other. You know, it was quite political. And one fine day on 5th December 1992, we found this big paper sticker on our door saying, Chalo Ayodhya 6 December, and our neighbor, who was mom's closest friend, comes and tells her कि अयोध्या से बहुत भीनी भीनी खुशबू आ रही है. And she was my mom's closest friend, and the next day there were acid bottles thrown into our house, and and my father was told that both his daughters will be raped, so we were thrown out. Having said that, I don't think it's just Muslims who have suffered in this country. Go and check how many Dalits in this country have been killed. I keep repeating this. It's not just about religion, it's also about caste, culture. I mean, as most of the officers that are maintained in this book belong to the backward classes who were made to do those murders, while the Brahmins and the upper classes occupied the higher positions. So the murderers...
Rana, how can you say that? In the middle of a riot, how do you decide that it's a higher caste who are not doing it? How do you do
this is not my observation.
How
This is
can
the
you do
observation. This is
a
the
caste
observation.
divide in the middle of
This
a
is the observation of Justice Sri Krishna in his commission report. It's not my observation.
It's a very odd observation that how do you how in a riot situation can you decide the caste of the people who are rioting?
No. I am saying that there is a big class discrimination even in our political hierarchy. For instance, OBC and that's what I'm saying about Gujarat and Maharashtra.
Okay, let me take one of these questions. What kind of a fallout do you expect from this, Rana?
I think the government will just ignore this.
They'll just ignore this.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that you said was that throughout the book, it comes out in the recordings that everyone says that Narendra Modi was smart enough never to give anything in writing, and so was Amit Shah. It was always done fourth hand, fifth hand. And
no, Amit Shah wasn't really that smart, but Mr. Modi, as they say, was certainly a smart man. Amit Shah, we have various his call recordings and his telephonic conversations in which he's giving orders about snooping on a woman. So he wasn't clearly very savvy enough.
What he says in your recordings, he says, what if he does? Will that fellow be allowed to walk the streets again? Now, this kind of scenario, how do you say Modi should have put off the switch? The remote was not in his hands. Whose hands was it in?
Well, then he should have resigned as the chief minister. He was reaping the benefits of the polarization.
No, my question is, he says the remote was not in his hands. In whose hands?
Whose hands? Who are we mentioning about?
He's talking about Modi. That it was out of his control, basically what he's saying in your recording.
What he means is that the remote was in the hands of the RSS and the VHP, and then later he goes on to say that he realized that once he's benefiting from it and he let it go, he turned a blind eye to it.
And now, do you think that journalists will have the guts to come out and do stories like yours, or do you think they'll be just as scared?
I think it's not about the journalists, it's about the institutions and the funding that they get from various funders, which kind of determines, and the advertising, which kind of determines what a journalist does. When I was sent, I was 26 for the sting operation, and I was never told that when you come back, we will have various considerations in our mind. I have witnessed in Tehelka how stories on Adani were killed, and later we saw 4-page ads, 4-page advertisements by Adani in the next issue. That kind of surprised me. So I really think that once a journalist joins an organization, you should brief them that, what, you're not supposed to report on this is kosher, this is sacrosanct.
Well, they do.
It happens everywhere, and so I'm saying Tehelka is no exception to the rule, which has now become a norm actually across the board, which is precisely why I've decided to stay independent. I call myself an independent journalist and not a freelancer, because I think I'm independent of these of these adverts and political considerations.
Have you had any hate mail or any threats, or are you afraid now?
I have got the worst kind of threat from Mr. Amit Shah himself indirectly. So when I was in Gujarat, I used to get these SMSs, this is Anandi Ben Patel, can you please call? Of course, it wasn't Anandi Ben Patel, she wasn't a fool. So one of the times when I was staying in BJP in a hotel, I got I called Tarun to give me a few copies of Tehelka because they were off the shelves. We had done a major expose. I call him at 9 in the evening, and 9 in the morning, I get a courier from somebody, and my hotel staff calls me and says, "Ma'am, there's a courier for you." I asked them to bring it in. Then it just occurred to me that by no stretch of imagination could a courier, step in from Delhi to Gujarat in a span of 12 hours, especially when they were supposed to send in the next morning. I went down. I asked the manager to open the packet because it was from an unnamed, unidentified location and address. He cut the packet, and there were 1,000 rupee notes all
So
stacked
this is not
neatly.
in your book?
Of course, it's there in my book.
Acha, I missed it.
Yeah, it's also there in Rajdeep Sardesai's book. I've also written about it in Tehelka when this thing happened. That stop intimidating us. When I first published Ishrat Jahan's the investigation of Ishrat Jahan linked it to Rajinder Kumar, the IB head. At least 6 journalists, 6 top editors, and 2 lawyers were called by the MHA to tell them that there was a CD of Rana Ayub with CBI officials. The rest was left to the imagination. You know how it happens when it's a woman, it's about, just leave it to the imagination. For 3 days, for 3 good days, Twitter was full of Rana Ayub CD, Rana Ayub MMS. As it transpired later, the CD had me and a few other journalists from Gujarat right outside Gujarat High Court standing with 2 CBI officials. So that's the CBI CD with Rana Ayub was really. This is the kind of stuff I face every day. I've had somebody call me on a daily basis, every time I used to be on a news channel, and you'd call me 70, 80 times in the evening. Even if I switched off my phone, I'd switch it on, he'd call my landline, he'd abuse my mom, he'd abuse my dad. I filed a complaint with Delhi Police because the number was from Delhi. They put him behind bars, and 2 days later they left him, and again he would start with the same routine. So I have had this kind of intimidation for the last 5-6 years. In fact, a journalist called me and said, I'm still stepping out from Amit Shah's office and he says मैं उसको देख लूँगा. तो मैंने कहा देख लो यार 6 साल से देख रही और देख लो. So
thank you, Rana. Amazing book, amazing journalistic work. Still needs an editor. You should have called me. Gujarat Files, Anatomy of a Cover-Up by Rana Ayub.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that, click up here to support us and down here to subscribe. Be sure to check out our older episodes and the other stuff we do like Can You Take It, I Agree, panel discussions, comics and animations, and much, much more.